James is the Outreach Director at the Ethical Society of St. Louis, one of the largest humanist congregations in the world. He's a graduate of Cambridge and Harvard Universities, and James is an in-demand public speaker, an engaging teacher, and a passionate advocate for human rights. Please welcome James Croft.
Thank you.
No problem. There's a height if you want.
Oh my!
Yeah.
This is a motorized podium, especially for shorter people like me. That's great. We don't have that in St. Louis. Good morning, everyone. I think I made it a little too low. Okay, that's better. How's it going? I tell you one thing that gives me joy is being here at the New York Society for Ethical Culture. I love visiting you here in New York. This is obviously the mothership, and although I adore the Ethical Society of St. Louis, it sometimes gives us the feeling of being a bit disconnected from the rest of the ethical movement, which is obviously centered around New York and the East Coast. So any chance I have to visit where we were born as a movement is profoundly joyful. I'm also very, very happy to see Anne and Bob, my two leader colleagues, here today. Thank you both very much for coming. It's lovely to see you. Of all the extraordinary inventions of the modern world, one of my favorites is emoji. Do you know what those are? Well, for the uninitiated, according to the oracle of all knowledge, Wikipedia, emoji are ideograms and smileys used in electronic messages and web pages. So you use emoji to give character to your text messages, expressing emotions and ideas through images instead of words. And it turns out that emoji have a long history. They developed from emoticons, which are icons created from normal typographical characters meant to express emotion by way of their resemblance to the human face. So here is an example of emoticons being used as far back as 1881 in the US satirical magazine Puck. And they're pretty good, aren't they? Emoji are a natural extension of the same idea, where instead of the regular typographical characters, little graphics take their place and can express a wide variety of ideas and emotions. And I love them. Anyone who follows me on Facebook or Twitter will be totally unsurprised by this, but when I text or contact people on a messaging app, I will pepper my communications with emoji. Emoji everywhere. And often I will post something and follow it with 3 of the same emoji just to make my emotions crystal clear, like this. And of all the hundreds of emoji, more than the winky face and the mischievous devil, what I think of as the sassy hand, and even, it is so sassy, right? Even the Vulcan salute, which has a special place in my heart as a huge Star Trek fan. My very favorite and most used emoji is the face with tears of joy. That is its official name, by the way. And in fact, if you look at the most used emoji on my phone, and this takes a lot of trust to share with you, you can learn an awful amount about a person from their most used emoji. But I trust you, I trust ethical culture people not to use this in the wrong way. You will see that, yes, indeed, the joy emoji is the most used, because the iPhone puts them in order of the most frequently used, followed closely by the hearts for eyes emoji, which I also adore, and the tears streaming down your cheeks emoji, which, don't worry, I usually use ironically. I am, I admit, a very emotionally exuberant person. I'm not alone in my love for the joy emoji, however. The Oxford English Dictionary in 2015 declared it Word of the Year, a coveted title which all words compete vigorously for. It's a vicious competition, I've heard, because according to their research, this was the most used emoji globally that year. Apparently, the joy emoji made up 20% of all the emojis used in the United Kingdom in 2015 and 17% of those in the United States. So the joy emoji is much loved and much used, not just by me. Even though I probably made up about half to 3/4 of all that usage, other people love it too. I'm not as weird as you might think, at least not for that reason. This, I think, we can understand. Joy is perhaps the most coveted of all our emotions. Many of our emotions have both good and bad qualities. An emotion like doubt or surprise can be good or bad depending on the context. But joy is an unalloyed positive. Everyone, I think, wants more joy in their life. And when we experience joy, we want to share it with others. So the joy emoji becomes the most popular of all. But why does it look like it does? Why is this the image we have settled upon to mean joy? After all, there are lots of different emojis for variations of happiness. Here are a few examples. We see on the left what I would describe as an enthusiastic smile. Looks something like that. And I think that's fair to say. A happy person, enthusiastic and open to the world. In the middle, we have what we might call a contented smile. The mouth is closed, the eyebrows raised. This is the expression I make when I snuggle into my couch and drink from a hot cup of tea at the end of a long, weary day. And finally, we have one a little bit closer to the joy emoji, with an open mouth and lots of teeth showing, eyes scrunched. This is someone in the middle of a laugh, perhaps. But joy is still different. With joy, the mouth is wide open and huge, the brow is creased, and it's the only one with tears. We cry tears of joy. Joy is a rare emotion like that, intense and powerful. It's not just happiness, not quite contentment. It's not just the warm fuzz of meeting with a friend or the sense of satisfaction from a job well done. Joy can be exuberant and explosive, or more internal, a sense of bone-deep peace, the conviction that nothing can be better than this moment right now. In either case, it can even be overwhelming, hence those tears. The reason why we cry when we are joyful is still somewhat mysterious to scientists. A 2014 journal article in Psychological Science by researchers at Yale suggested that perhaps we cry at moments of great joy because our body is trying to restore some sort of emotional equilibrium, balancing out intense happiness with a physical expression more often associated with sadness, just as we sometimes find ourselves smiling when we are in deep sorrow. Perhaps this research suggests the tears which sometimes accompany our joy are our body's attempt to return us to an emotional even keel? Perhaps. But the truth is, we don't really know. Joy is a mystery to science. And it is also a mystery to me. I realized as I composed this platform address that I hadn't spent a lot of time thinking deeply about joy. I'm a positive, energetic, upbeat person. I tend towards happiness. I'm also rather loud and boisterous, as my husband will confirm. But I honestly hadn't ever deeply considered what joy is and how we might actively pursue it. And as I thought about it, I found it really difficult to pin down. I recalled my own personal moments of joy, a time when I was overwhelmed by the beauty of a piece of music I was singing with a group at high school, a time when I was filled with so much happiness and gratitude at the presence of my family, rarely together, as we celebrated the holidays. A time when I broke down laughing with my grandfather while sitting in the back garden of my family's home in London until we were both weeping uncontrollably. But I couldn't pull together a common thread which linked all those experiences. And my reading on the topic didn't help at all. When I write a platform address, I usually do a lot of research. And in my research for this platform, I found so many different definitions of joy, many of which are totally incompatible with each other. So here are a couple of contradictory definitions of joy I discovered in my search. Joy is a sudden burst of happiness, like an elevator in a building that takes you up to higher levels of happiness only for a short amount of time and then back. Okay, so a sudden burst of happiness that lasts only a short time. Then I found this. Joy is lasting, based on inward circumstances, a sense of permanent contentment. Okay, so joy is supposed to be lasting, but it's also supposed to be a sudden burst of happiness that doesn't last very long. How can that be? And the best thing was, both those definitions came from the same web page. Well, I thought, perhaps it's just a personal matter. Perhaps people experience joy in different ways, and there are many viable definitions because we're all different. We each have our own varying definitions of joy, and that's that. But that didn't satisfy me, because even though we're all different, in the words of Monty Python, we're all individuals. We are all also human beings, and we share much of our emotional experience. We may describe our feelings with different words, but we have a common set of feelings, and we all know, I think, that there is a difference between mere happiness and joy, even if we can't quite agree on what that difference is. So instead of trying to define joy, I started to think about the people I've met in my life who I consider to be the most joyful, to see if they could offer a hint as to what joy truly is. And based on an encounter with one such person, I'm going to give you my best guess about how we can learn to be more joyful. But I could very well be wrong. And today especially, I welcome discussion with you after platform to see if you agree with what I've come up with. One of the most joyful experiences of my life, which tipped me off to the nature of joy, was spending a day with the legendary cellist Yo-Yo Ma. Yes, that's pretty good, isn't it? I thought that would get you interested. I was attending a special weekend workshop about the arts in education, which is what I used to study. It was the subject of much of my research at Harvard. And Yo-Yo Ma was one of the presenters and participants. And he was sharing with us his work with the Silk Road Project, which he founded to create music that engages difference, sparking radical cultural collaboration and passion-driven learning to build a more hopeful world. And you can see from this image of the Silk Road Project musicians that it was a very joyful enterprise. It looks to me like they're having a lot of fun. And I think that joyfulness can be traced back to the project's founder, because what impressed me about Yo-Yo Ma was the intensity of joy with which he approached absolutely everything he did when he was with us. One afternoon, I was sitting at a small table with him, and his joy was more than infectious. It was weaponized. When he laughed, which was very often, he threw his joy around the room, not at all in an obnoxious way, but in an inviting way, as if he was welcoming us to partake in his emotion. He would find something, a little something someone said, or a piece of music someone played, delightful, and he would turn and look at everyone on the table, this enraptured expression on his face like this, to make sure that everyone else was experiencing the same joy he was, sort of like a human Muppet. That was the sort of face that he had on. And in fact, Yo-Yo Ma is kind of a human Muppet, since he has appeared on Sesame Street multiple times. I love this tiny little video when he was much younger of him playing cello with Elmo. I hope this works. As we were working with him, it was impossible not to be swept up in his joy. And I was profoundly affected by Ma's joyfulness. It was simply delightful to be in the same room as him. And his example has stuck with me ever since. Now, to be fair, it's important to recognize that Yo-Yo Ma has a life which might lend itself easily to joy. He has a career that he clearly loves, and he is one of the most famous and well-regarded musicians in the world, perhaps in the history of the world. He has sold millions and millions of records and been awarded countless accolades, and so we might be forgiven for thinking that joy would come easily to him, given the success he has enjoyed in his life. But I don't think that's the whole story. I had a sense back then, and I believe it still now, that Yo-Yo Ma's joy was in some important way a choice. It wasn't just the product of an extremely successful career, but the fruits of a joyful orientation toward life. Somehow, I intuited, Yo-Yo Ma had learned to be joyful. And I think we can too. I'm not saying that we can learn to turn joy on and off like a light switch. I don't think we have so much control over our emotions as that. But I think that we can tend to the garden of our experience so that it is more welcoming to the bright, chirruping bird of joy. How can we do that? I think, and I must say again that I'm tentative about these conclusions, but I think the joyful orientation has three components. The first is service. In one interview, Ma was thinking aloud about his role as a musician. And he said this, "I've been thinking music is a service. Music was invented because it does something to create community. Yes, musicians need to live, they need to have food. The transactional part comes further down the chain. But the actual purpose of music is an offering. It's a service. If you have that attitude, you can't go wrong because you're always in the right place. You're in the right state of mind to make that offering." I think this sense of one's life as an offering to others is one part of what has filled Yo-Yo Ma's life with joy. And research supports the idea that when we do things for other people, even something as simple as washing the dishes or mowing their lawn, we feel happier and our levels of anxiety decrease. And I believe an orientation towards serving other people, improving others' lives, is a key component of a joyful life. To be clear, I'm not talking about service in a self-abnegating way, a way where we debase ourselves in order to give to other people. Doing things for others because we believe they are worth more than we are. Rather, I'm talking about genuinely recognizing the gifts that we have and considering how others might benefit from those gifts. We all have gifts that we can give to those around us. You don't have to be able to play the cello, I can't at all, you don't want to hear me try, in order to be an offering to our friends and family. When we see ourselves as having something to offer others, we both get the satisfaction of being of value to other people and reinforce our own self-worth. Because we come to understand that we have the power to improve others' lives. And I think that is part of how we can learn to be joyful. But service to others is not enough to invite joy into your life. Some people serve others in a grudging or an ascetic way, seeming to derive no satisfaction from what they offer other people, just doing it because they think they must. And that won't lead to joy. I think the joyful orientation includes, along with the desire to offer our gifts to others, a sense of gratitude for the opportunity to make a difference. Another quote from Ma, "I feel very, very blessed to have such an interesting life and to be able to have little snapshots of lives of people from many different parts of the world." That sense of gratitude for the life that we have, for the blessedness of our existence, is key to joy, I think. It's not always possible to access that feeling, and we certainly won't feel it all the time. But when we can take a moment to be thankful for the opportunity of living, I think we're moving towards joy. No less authorities than the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who are authors of the Book of Joy, so they should know, call gratitude one of the pillars of joy. And to me, they seem more joyful than most. So we should probably follow their example. Finally, I think that to live a life full of joy requires us to share our joy with others. If joy comes from offering ourselves fully and with gratitude to other people, then joy is a social emotion. We might say that while we can experience happiness alone, joy requires company. That has been my experience, at least. Joy comes most readily to me when I'm sharing my life with others. And I think it's no coincidence that Yo-Yo Ma is a serial collaborator, choosing to make music with people from all over the world, constantly stretching himself by building new relationships through music. And this clearly brings him enormous joy, the connections he makes with others enriching his own experience. And that can be true of us too. When we make deep connections with other people, learning from them and allowing them to learn from us, I think the feelings of connection and abundance which come with that can help us be more joyful. In fact, I think this social component of joy helps explain one of the mysteries with which we began. Why the joy emoji is the most popular of all. By sharing our joy with others, we help them become more joyful, and that rebounds on us. It's a virtuous cycle. As Shakespeare writes in Sonnet 8, joy delights in joy. And the more joy we radiate, the more we receive in return. So service, gratitude, sharing, the three components of joy according to James Croft. But what evidence do I have that I am right? I have to admit that this question bothered me while I was preparing this platform address. I am aware that I cannot prove that pursuing those three elements will help make your life more joyful. But I have at least two reasons to think so. The first comes from weddings. I love to perform weddings, and I've performed a lot of weddings this year, particularly this summer. And in every wedding, I see these three components of joyfulness. In my judgment, it's not the music, the beautiful outfits, or even the food which brings the couple joy on their wedding day. Rather, it is their commitment to serve each other, to bring out the best in each other. Their gratitude for the goodness of their relationship and for the presence of their family and friends. And the sharing of their joy in public and their family and friends reflecting their joy back at them. It is truly an enormous privilege to be in the middle of all that joy. I often end wedding ceremonies with tears in my eyes and a face aching from smiling, just like in that emoji. So that's my first piece of evidence. My second comes from what I'm doing right now. Because as I thought about it more, I realized that one of the things that gives me most joy in the world is standing here and speaking with you, my ethical humanist community. Here I feel like I'm being of service. I wake up every morning grateful for the opportunity and privilege of being an ethical culture leader. And I love sharing this space with you on a Sunday morning as we meet to seek the highest in ourselves and in each other. Do you know how this work makes me feel? It makes me feel like that. Thank you very much.
So thank you, James. Thank you. The one takeaway is that when one of my students calls me a Muppet, I will now know they're just saying I'm joyful.